Ashes of Creation is on a cliff. The most decisive moment in whether or not this game is going to succeed is close on the horizon. Thank God fall damage is turned off. Coppolit, anyone? No? More for me.
That moment is where the past 2 years of Intrepid's hard work will be playable and viewable to the public for the first time since the technical alpha in 2021. This game that is not a game yet but still has thousands of passionate copium addicts believing with all their hearts that this will be the next great MMORPG to eat our lives up and escape to is on the brink. It all comes down to Alpha 2. Alpha 1 was a bare bones glorified tech demo, but it did prove the game's ability to host a large amount of players in one area with extremely good performance both server and client side. I personally participated in a few of the Alpha 1 50v50 sieges, and my fairly mediocre PC ran it great FPS-wise, and I saw little to no network problems, no rubber banding, etc. Alpha 1 also demonstrated basic versions of essential systems, but Alpha 2 is truly what the fate of Ashes in the public opinion hinges upon. As stated by Steven, the majority of the game's system and features will be implemented at least in their early iterations in Alpha 2. A2 is also going to be the start of persistently playable servers all the way up until launch. Surely there will be some downtime in there, but nowhere near the 15 months or so since Alpha 1 at this point, plus whatever time between now and A2's release. One only has to look at the plethora of other games either releasing too early and unfinished, as many MMORPGs have, trying to meet arbitrary deadlines set by corporate, ruining that ever so important first impression and causing irreversible damage to the game's community, even if those issues are fixed later. Many never give it a second chance because of their initial bad experience. Or in the case of many survival PvP games I have played, they intentionally release unfinished betas like Rust, DayZ, and Escape from Tarkov so player feedback can guide the development of the game so developers don't put too many resources into systems that end up being unfun or tedious to play. An open development with constant live servers like this means very close and responsive community input, but it also means the vast majority of people will look at the product as it is and make an instant judgment, permanently damaging the game's image if what's presented isn't extremely polished. The first impression is what sticks with today's attention span, and there is also a unique level of hype and exposure that builds around games about to release, and it doesn't matter whether you tell everyone that that release is an early alpha version release. No matter what Steven and the team say, it won't even matter if the game's UI has a giant flashing bold red text watermark saying "In development, early version, many problems, please have mercy." People will still critique it as it is, and to a certain extent as they should, so problems can be fixed. But I have the somewhat unique experience of playing two games, now titans of their genre, from very early versions, which, if taken at face value back when I first played them, were not even a drop in the bucket of where they are today. But that progress came at a cost of constant berating from their communities and a lot of struggle on the developers' side. Now here's the good side of the open development coin, and why I'm so excited Intrepid's plan for their game is this. The two best games I've ever played are ones that had open development cycles and close relationships with their players. I'm talking about Escape from Tarkov and Rust, both games still in constant active development that I have played more or less since they first existed. In Tarkov's case, literally before it existed in the public eye more than 6 years ago when it was in closed alpha. Rust I haven't played quite since it was a browser game, but shortly after it was released to Steam. Those two games have had to endure some of the most violent community outcries when bugs, problems, and bad decisions in development occurred due to their closeness with their community. Tarkov particularly is the closest game in its development backstory I have seen to Ashes. Tarkov is a survival shooter, but with heavy MMO aspects tied in, and it, just like Ashes, had no large publisher funding it, no big advertising budget, nor previous fandom of its IP to play off of and kickstart its player base. I watched EFT grow from the time it had one streamer on Twitch in the Tarkov section and maybe a few thousand players, and probably 5% of the features, guns, game system, and maps it has now, not to mention god-awful netcode issues and borderline unplayable bugs and hacker issues, to the titan of the survival game genre it is today, rivaling and surpassing games like DayZ and Rust, boasting tens of thousands of concurrent Twitch viewers in the Tarkov section even in lull periods, and hundreds of thousands during wipes/new content patches. Why I'm going on about 2 survival games in a video about an upcoming MMORPG I will get to in a moment. The Escape from Tarkov devs made up for their lack of backing in prior fans in 2 ways which Intrepid can learn from and take heed. Firstly, plain and simple, they were persistent despite their many shortcomings along the way and the outcry from their community when the many things that went wrong. When the shit, or rather the netcode, hit the fan, the devs put their heads down, never caved to the backlash, and, well, developed. Even if it took much longer than the players would have liked, especially the kind of players that like to post on Reddit, they eventually achieved truly great and unique gameplay experiences as of today, and even after these 6 years, Tarkov still has years more of development ahead of it, and I'm sure Rust does too. Secondly, and this one, unfortunately, Ashes fundamentally is going to have a hard time replicating. Even if Escape from Tarkov had a long period of downtime lacking new content or a rough and buggy, hacker-filled few months, the second the game picked back up steam, the massive Twitch community Tarkov streamers fostered would get the message out. There's a new update with big bug fixes and loads of new content. The reason Ashes can't replicate this is summed up pretty well by this video, which I'll link in the description, as the next minute or two is pretty much a rip of his information. The summary of his video is that the always-on PvP nature of Ashes is going to quickly alienate streamers because of how frustrating stream sniping will be in an open-world, always-on PvP MMO with half loot drop upon death. No streamer is going to be able to effectively do high-end PvE content without getting ambushed or camped by a PvP guild, nor escape PKing after a long gathering run where they found a legendary vein of ore and instantly become a target by their viewers for that loot. Now, I want to be clear, I'm not against PvP at all. The thing that drew me to Ashes in the first place is the off-rails experience. Being a Rust and Tarkov player for the last decade, my entire enjoyment in gaming is built off of the suffering of others, more or less. I want plenty of PvP content, especially contesting PvE content, which is one of the largest gameplay loops Ashes is likely to have. You and your guild want to do a dungeon for its rare drops you need for some crafting thing you're doing or whatever, and you have to fight the 3 other guilds who also want to get in there and kill that dungeon. YouTubers will obviously act as a similar form of free advertising and get around the stream sniping issue entirely, but alienating live streamers cuts off a huge potential viewership of your game. Tarkov specifically, for whatever reason, heavily appeals to live stream audiences, probably due to the fact it's so punishing. It can be more enjoyable sometimes to relax and watch a good player do their thing than get your own shit pushed in for the 9th time that day. Where Ashes is promised to be fully funded to completion by Steven, the creative director, and his heavy pockets, Tarkov would likely never have got off the ground if it wasn't for the free advertising generated by the huge streaming community. So maybe Steven's chunky bank account and the YouTube community around Ashes will be enough to offset the downsides of less of a streaming community around the game. Obviously, we will have to see how things actually pan out once the game is, well, a game. Maybe the corruption system will be implemented so incredibly well that stream sniping won't be such an egregious issue that streamers are totally alienated. But honestly, based on how insane sniping seems to be in other MMOs, it might just be an insurmountable problem. At the very least, though, activities like stuff in your home node, freehold stuff, artisan crafting and processing will be streamable, sieges and monster coin events will be streamable without sniping being as much of a problem and such, but there are a lot of hurdles between the standard obnoxious reception to streamers in MMORPGs and a thriving streamer community, bringing far more eyes and free advertising for Ashes without the worry of open world PvE/PvP being more or less unplayable for streamers. So, as I see it, there are 2 cliffs Intrepid and Ashes stand upon, teetering dangerously close to the edge, and those are the risk of alienating streamers and their free advertising, and obviously the average player via PvP being always on, since that is a turnoff for many people, and secondly, Alpha 2's first few weeks of impressions are going to stick in people's minds, whether in a good way or not. So, Steven, if I could talk directly to you, I would say the one cliff you can avoid, as much as it pains me to say, because I honestly couldn't care less the state of the game. I want to play it today, bug-filled, unfinished and all, but I think you should take as much time as you possibly can to make Alpha 2 a smooth product that will look good to YouTube and Twitch audiences. As far as the streamer alienation issue in a PvP open world loot drop ripe for sniping game, if you figure out a solution to that, I will be more amazed than when former President Donald McDonald Trump said,